Faraz Shaukat Ali.
Good morning and welcome to Newsline, live from the Newsfirst studios in Dawson Street in Colombo. And joining us this morning is Dr. Sarat Amanugama, former Minister of Finance, current parliamentarian and a minister. Very good morning to Dr. Sarat. How are you?
Good morning. Good morning.
We're delighted, of course, to have you on our network.
Thank you.
And we're also joined again this morning by Bandula Jayasekara. After a bit of a journey yesterday, where he apparently had a whale of a time.
Yeah, I took a break, but we missed you, and we hope you'll join us soon.
Indeed, indeed.
Yeah, you'll have to host this special program.
I would like to ask you, Dr. Amanugama, because you're former Minister of Finance and so on, and you know the answers to these sort of things. So, can you tell me, post-independence, how many times has a budget been so amended as our most recent budget?
I think, well, from time to time, budgets do get amended.
Yeah.
As you know, the figures that are provided in the budget speech gets amended due to various reasons. You have the discussions in the House, the committee stage, when suggestions can be made, and some of it is incorporated and then you change the statistics. Sometimes simple arithmetical problems arise where you tot up the numbers and it all don't add up. But those are what I would say cosmetic changes. But this time's budget has undergone severe cuts, severe transformation. So I would say in this case, this is a rare occasion where that's topsy-turvy in a sense. So there were cases, I must say, where you would recall, where once some of the budget proposals were turned down by the cabinet. I think it was Mr. Felix Bandaranaike. He immediately resigned. So there are different.
How come Ravi is not resigning?
No, it's up to each individual minister.
I mean, we rather feel, in a way, we have a lot of sympathy towards this current finance minister, because it appears to me, watching it from the outside, that he's got one arm firmly tied behind his back and the Prime Minister is holding that string, and his other arm, every now and then he's allowed to use it. And so, it looks like they never really wanted him to be the finance minister.
Or do you think that he's harassed? Is Ravi harassed, like Faraz says? Is he harassed by the
basically, the finance minister, under this governmental arrangement, is appointed by the president on the recommendation of the Prime Minister. Here it is also noteworthy that the Prime Minister is also the leader of the party, who has come to Parliament after an election with their own manifesto. So any finance minister, for that matter, cannot operate on his own. He in a sense represents the President and Prime Minister, and certainly represents the cabinet. So though for media purposes and symbolic purposes the finance minister appears there, there's a whole series of activities that take place behind the scenes, as it were, which affects his proposals and his behavior.
But, when you were Minister of Finance, you had all the banks listed under you, the Central Bank, the Treasury, everything. In the case of, I'm going to have to say poor Ravi, in the case of poor Ravi, the banks have been handed over to somebody else. The state enterprises have been handed over to somebody else. I'm rather wondering what on earth he's left with.
And somebody just said that he's got only the blood bank.
Perhaps he's only got the blood bank. But why is it? It appears
normally the blood bank is not listed under the finance ministry.
Yeah,
but anyway, the demarcation of functions for ministries is a matter for the president and the prime minister. Each minister can't go and say, well, this is my demarcation and these are the institutions that I should have. He can certainly say it, you know, in camera as it were.
Yeah.
But the final decision is made by the president and prime minister.
Yes, so in the case of Ravi, it appears to me that we can draw a comparison between what happened to senior members of the SLFP under President Rajapaksa, and he sort of didn't allow them to blossom. He made sure that he trimmed it all down. And so it looks like Ravi, because he's a rising he's on the upward movement, he's upwardly mobile, a yuppie in that sort of sense, that the Prime Minister, because it is his recommendation, that the President is merely sort of only endorsing that, that Ravi is being given a particularly hard time.
Well, you know, when you look at the history of this relationship between the finance minister and the government, in Sri Lanka, the pattern has been basically for the president or head of the party to be also the Minister of Finance. We had that under Mr. Vijayatunga. We had that under Chandrika for some time. Then certainly under Mahinda, because Mahinda Rajapaksa was not only president, he was also the Minister for Finance, continuously. That is a part of his signature, you may call it the signature tune.
Right.
Only very few ministers of finance have been appointed, other than the head of state. One was myself, where CBK appointed me the Minister of Finance. Another was Choksi, who was appointed by Ranil.
Yeah.
And the third was Ravi. As far as I recall, only 3 people that I mentioned have functioned as Ministers of Finance.
Ronnie Dimel?
Ronnie Dimel in the very early
stage.
But in all the other cases, in Ronnie Dimel's case, Mr. Jayajawan was a stickler for the British system, where he wanted the Minister of Finance to be separate.
Yeah.
But all the others have found it convenient to be also the Minister of Finance. Now, in a sense,
Jay's nephew is not a stickler for that system, or Jay's nephew or relative Ranil.
No, but Ranil also has always, now he had first Mr. Choksi, now he has Ravi. So he also has followed, I would say, the JR tradition.
But like Faraj says, the leg pulling, hand tying.
No, I must tell you as a former Minister of Finance that no finance minister is as independent as he pretends to be. All ministers of finance like to say that they are independent, but in fact what happens? That is a collegiate corporate decision of the government. Each finance minister can't do what he wants. And in the modern context, not only is he in a sense a captive of the government, he's also been pressurized by global institutions. Now, if you look at the amount of indebtedness we have, so that's a pressure on him, whether he likes it or not. Then various pressures like expanding the recurrent expenditure. Now, one phenomenon that we have seen, which is being criticized very heavily, is this in the last budget and this one, expanding the commitment for social welfare, commitment for salaries, in the sphere of recurrent expenditure. So, really no finance minister is independent as the public think. It's more a corporate decision. And so when the pressure is on, the corporate group tends to take it out on the finance minister.
Dr. Amnapur, what's this now famous, I'm sure, for us, this Yahapalan record. Look at the Island editorial about the release of these 200 SUVs.
Yes.
What have you got to say? That government is losing. What's happening?
The way we understand it, very simply, is that after some intense lobbying, during the second stage of the Rajapaksa years, the Treasury Secretary agreed that car imports can be, the duty can be calculated on the transacted value. So the actual invoice that you paid for the car. Because there was a lot of concern that the local agents were having a two-tier system of valuation. One for their own import and one for other imports. So that it appeared rather good. However, some people have imported these vehicles from Japan. 200, let's say 200 vehicles. And they have, their transacted value was found to have been undervalued by the customs. So the customs imposed the correct level of duty, which in this instance amounts to per vehicle about 1.6 million rupees. Then under the customs ordinance and within the powers that are vested in them, their rights, the customs were able to levy a fine equivalent to the underpaid duty. So another 1.6 million. So it was 3.2 million that was due to be paid. After much lobbying, the Minister of Finance, it's him again, the Minister of Finance decides to permit the 1.6 million underpaid duty to remain, and he dismissed the fine. Now obviously the customs are up in arms because they have a vested interest. They legally, under the customs ordinance, they get 50% off the fine. Is that fair?
Well, I don't know the particulars of this case.
Yeah.
But I can tell you the general principle, and one of the problems we had regarding revenue collection. You know, the most critical point today is that our revenue collection is the lowest in Asia.
Yeah.
When you think of the percentage of GDP that we collect as revenue, Sri Lanka is at the bottom of the list.
Yeah.
And there is an urgent need to increase the governmental revenue, because it is only when you increase the revenue that you can invest, whether it is social welfare or infrastructure development or whatever you call it. You must have the wherewithal to invest. Otherwise, you will have to take the Rajapaksa route and go on borrowing with long-term deleterious results. So, in Sri Lanka, all governments, without exception, are scared to impose these taxes because there is a huge political fallout. Now, one of the areas where there has to be a tightening up, doesn't matter which government, is the three areas where government gets main revenue. That is customs, excise, and there's a third source, income tax. The inland revenue, excise, and customs. These three are the areas from which we get. There is a continuous complaint that government is not receiving what it should be from these three sources.
Quite. So
because there is so much of corruption.
So when he wrote off the other 1.6 million in the fine, he also wrote off not only the 800,000 rupees goes towards the customs offices, but also another 800,000 rupees times 200 or whatever it was, 153 was I think the right figure. So he wrote that off too.
No, I don't know as I said before, I don't know the specifics of this case. But I want to continue on my earlier argument. There is a lot of racketing going on in those three areas, and particularly as regards car imports. Because as you rightly mentioned, what is invoiced very often is a fake invoice. You know, there is under-invoicing because the duties are levied on the basis of this invoice. So if the invoice is fake, then the consequent taxes also come down. So really we have been living in this Alice in Wonderland world where right from the start there's under-invoicing, then it comes here, then the local people who should be taxing are also not, shall I say, fully receptive to all these problems.
You're right, Dr.
So this is the problem.
It is absolutely Alice in Wonderland. Because some months ago, perhaps a year ago, I turned to a magazine of a national newspaper, which contains a lot of advertising, and I was rather puzzled because I live in Wales, and not far from a dealer that sells British four-wheel drive vehicles. Right? I don't want to mention the brand, but so I happen to know the cost of these things. But I looked at the paper, the magazine, and all these vehicles, they were selling at the remarkable price of $35,000 US. And then they had a little catch there. They said, plus local fees. You can't buy one of those four-wheel drive luxury British-made vehicles for $35,000. It cost more like $57,000. So I did write an article saying, miracle in Sri Lanka, because it's the cheapest place to buy it. But there is clearly, patently, under invoicing.
That's what we are the miracle of Asia.
So you have to now, why does this happen?
Yeah.
Look, without going into the specifics which I am not aware of. The problem is every government has been giving all sort of exemptions. Every time there is some agitation, you give an exemption.
But what about the poor? The poor is neglected.
Wait till you. So under the BOI exemptions are
sorry, can I just cut in here, because it's time for us to take a break. We'll be right back listening to this very interesting explanation about taxes and customs duties with Dr. Amanagama shortly after this break. Welcome back to Newsline, live from the Newsfirst studios with Dr. Sarat Amanagama and Bandla Jayasekara. So tell me, Dr. Amanagama, what can be done? Why is this continuously? We've had independence for so long, and we seem unable yet to collect this revenue, this very important revenue from customs.
I think I should give a comprehensive answer, because this is a key factor in the economy of Sri Lanka and budgeting in Sri Lanka. Because the government is not receiving the taxes it is entitled to get. And when you don't receive that money, it means the activities, potential activities of the government for the people gets curtailed. To the extent that it loses that revenue, to that same extent it can't invest in the country and the people.
In schools or in medical or whatever.
So this is a very serious matter. Instead of going into details, individual details, we look at the structural factors. One is, over a period of time, various exemptions are given. Say under BOI, under personal car imports, under then company, a whole structure of exemptions have been given. And what does it mean? You give it to some official, some big bureaucratic poobah to decide, well, are we going to use this exemption or not give that exemption, or whether we give it on time. I mean, a whole series of openings for corruption are built into when you give exemptions. So this is one. The second reason is that if you escape, shall we say, in the import of cars, then there must be another area that can catch you up, no? For example, in income tax or corporate tax or whatever. Now, even those sections are not working. So then there is political support also for some of them, because various politicians are also supporting them because there's a payback, or during election time there's. So we have created a huge mafia. It is a huge political, bureaucratic business mafia. I can remember there was this, you would remember, Eisenhower in his last days referred to the military industrial mafia in the United States. He said, as president I am helpless, I can't do anything, because it is this mafia that is. So it's something like that. There's a huge mafia that is running this in these operations. So this has to be stopped with one thing. That is, if you can give me 1 minute, give me one. That is, technology must come into this picture. Now I'll give you one example, which when I was Minister of Finance I tried to remedy, but that is, when goods come into the country, each one of this is not checked. You'll be shocked to hear. There are what are called random checks. If 100 containers come, maybe 7 or 8 are opened and you check. others have free passage. So now I said no, there are X-ray machines. You have to X-ray every one of those and it has to be recorded. And not only that, due to security factors, for example, the American market, the EU market, you are quite familiar with that. They say unless you check the goods and anything going out of this country or coming into this country, we can't trade with you because we don't know what is coming in your containers. You know, so today it is this monitoring, this filming, this recording using technology is vital. But our unions, our public, they still don't know. Our bureaucracy still doesn't know. And one more thing I want to say, I can remember at that time, the Americans said, if you can't afford these machines, I think they gifted two machines.
They gave us
They gave two machines.
That's right.
But you know what happened? Within weeks, the machines were dismantled.
They broke it or they destroyed it.
It was not operating.
They work perfectly well elsewhere in other markets.
So it's not only an economic issue, it is also a security issue. If we don't know what is coming in these containers and what is going out in these containers, we do have a big issue.
But that's perfectly right, what you say about all these concessions. Why should anyone get any concession? If you are able to pay 18 million rupees for a Range Rover, for example, then I think you are at a level economically where you don't really, where another 2 or 3 million here or there, it doesn't make that much of a material difference. And if you are able to afford a vehicle at 18 million or 20 million, then come on, it's up to you to pay the right duties. I think it's morally wrong.
You have put your finger in the political problems in this country. We are so politically competitive that we wait for the other man to slip up rather than have your own proposals. And all the time you are increasing your voter group by giving concessions.
But nobody Yahapalana times.
So that's right. So we have to change it. That is why some initiatives were made to do away with concessionary permits. But it was shut down. The opposition immediately took this up as though some huge violence was done to the professionals of this country and things like that. So governments have to back down. So that is why some sort of consensus in this country is necessary.
But why can't we make strong, hard decisions for the betterment of the people?
That is because, you know, even this mafia includes not only the politicians, it includes media, includes civil society people. So that now take this question of car permits. What is the attitude of the media? What is the attitude of the civil society? It's all divided. So even on simple things like that, we have not been able to pull away from self-interest for the simple reason that in a highly contested situation, political situation, willy-nilly the opposition or people who are not in power, it can change, but whoever is not in power immediately highlights this as some gross injustice is done to somebody. But behind it is the fact that this setup is going on. Now take the case of individual permits. Do you think every fellow who gets a permit contacts a vehicle? Now like what you said, nothing like that happens. There are so many intermediaries.
Indeed.
These fellows go and sell the permit. Then that guy gathers all these permits. Then he imports in bulk. So now tell me one case. We'll forget about the politicians. We'll say that they are a venal lot. That's what you always say. Tell me one case where the media has exposed this racket.
What,
from A to Z on this.
Dr. Amanagama, you need to write. You need to read some of the articles that I have written on this subject.
I agree. I have read some of that. But then, as a mass protest, it's not there.
And I have one of these cars with not a concessionary permit, you understand. I had to pay, and just in case, because I know that there has been an element of trying to get me to throw mud at me on this issue, I paid. And I challenge anyone to say that I didn't pay. I paid 1.6 million, I have paid. 1.5 million duty and 100,000 fine. So I didn't get any concession permit, nor did I get those laptops, by the way.
Sure?
Yeah, no, nothing.
But you get ties, very expensive ties.
I think, oh yes.
Which cost £100.
These are donated by a very lovely friend who's more cooked than anything else. But I want to say this, the message from one of our viewers. It says that normally the tax law amendments immediately follow the budget.
Yes.
But it says, but so far the tax laws are not in place yet. Why?
No, why? Because still we don't know the full contours of the budget. As the Prime Minister himself said in the House, he's going to make a statement.
He's meddling with Mr. Finance Minister's work.
No.
That poor chap's worked hard and he's presented something only for him to be upstaged by the Prime Minister.
Do you think he works hard? Otherwise, the vehicles would not be released if he works so hard.
Now the point is this. In this tightly contested political context, I can be quite frank with you. Yeah. Every issue becomes something else. I can remember Mr. Tasi Vittachi's famous witticism that in Sri Lanka, everything is about something else. Everything is about something else. So, there have been various pressures once these proposals have come in, and some of it is basically political pressure also, because affected parties don't, some of them do come direct, but others work through the political system. So, this budget, as you said when we began this debate, has been distorted. Some may say distorted beyond measure. Somebody might say, well, just within this area of operations, but somebody's got to now work out what is in and what is out and what are the statistical implications, because every one of these decisions which was related to a revenue measure, once you delete that, it means you are not going to get that money. If you don't get that money, it means you have to cut down what you are proposing to do with that money.
But Dr. Amnakumar, what about the people's aspirations? People voted for a change. They wanted a change.
Yeah.
But what's happening to that change?
So people want a change. Certain proposals were put forward. But one can also argue that change has to be managed. I mean, now let us take this. In a country with this sort of parliamentary situation, one might ask, is it possible to put all these reforms into one budget?
Yeah.
That's one question.
Yeah.
There is a question of persuasion, question of communication, question of, riding along with the blow to get what you want done.
Yeah.
That is the essence of politics. I mean, if it is simply putting a wish list out there, you don't need politicians, no? Some economic gurus can just give a list, we like to do this, but it won't be practical. Or if somebody tries to do that, they'll have to go home. So it's always, politics is negotiation. What is good has to be communicated and has to be matched with what is possible.
Well, why do you think they didn't ask Dr. Jayasundar to stay on? He served Mrs. Kumaratunga, he served Mr. Rajapaksa.
Well, I must say, I'm a great friend of Dr. Jayasundara. Not only a friend, I'm a great admirer of him as a very practical economist.
Well, there you are,
and we should use his skills.
No, but I would say when we got to go, we got to go. There should be a retirement age. We cannot, we all have our expiry date. This is what my...
But I think that the way that the Prime Minister is struggling to understand the budget, he hasn't passed the tax laws and so on yet, and all that, it looks like we need Dr. Jayasundara back. Perhaps Dr. Jayasundara will come on our show and explain to us why it is that he doesn't want to come back.
There are many Dr. Jayasundaras in this country.
Yeah. No.
Indeed.
But, well, we have so many economists. If you look at Dr. Jayasundara's background, he was in the central bank, then he was a DST in the treasury, and I have found him. I must tell you,
unfortunately,
one very, very good public officer.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Dr. Sara Tamanagama, for gracing us with your presence here. And just on other note, apart from thanking you, Bandula, what you do matters, but why you do it matters so much more. Thank you for watching Newsline. Take care, have a great day, and God bless.
Thank you very much.
News First, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.